Now, over the past few days, we've been reminded of how kings and queens in this United Kingdom and other kingdoms continue to fascinate people. We saw the crowds greeting the Queen at Royal Ascot. We were introduced to the new King of Spain, Philip VI. And we learnt more about how King Richard III will finally be given a proper burial more than 500 years after his death. He's the king, you'll remember, whose bones were identified after being discovered beneath a car park in Leicester 2 years ago. Well, he's to be buried in Leicester Cathedral sometime next year. That's what the law has laid down, the judges have. Church officials have unveiled the design of Richard's final resting place, a stone tomb of a simple modern design made of Swaledale stone, reflecting Richard's connection to the Royal House of York. Now, Dominic Selwood is a writer and historian who's had some pretty strong feelings about the royal burial plans. You wanted him buried at York, didn't you? Just explain why.
Well, it seems that all the evidence is that Richard himself wanted to be buried at York. He had established in York Minster a chantry, which is a system whereby priests can pray for his soul for eternity after his death. And he paid for 100 priests to be there. And by the time he died, 6 of the altars had already been built for that to be established. And from more recent records that have been discovered, even just in the last week, it's clear that it was his intention to build a family mausoleum for himself and his descendants in York. So really, that's the strongest reason there is. It's his wish.
But you lost that battle sadly in the courts.
The courts did come to a decision on a technical point of law about public policy as to whether it was right to entrust the university alone to make the decision or whether there should have been wider consultation. But really, I think they missed the opportunity to go wider and look beyond the narrow legal principles and decide, well, what is the right thing to do for a man who really is quite exceptional in English history. He was the last medieval king, he was the last Plantagenet king, he was the last king of the House of York, he was the last king to die in battle, and he was the last king to die in battle on British soil. So really, it may well be that the courts could have taken a wider view and looked a little more broadly.
In any event, what do you think of the tomb? Because apparently it's going to be very simple, a sort of modern design.
The tomb, yes, it's a slab of stone. It's squared off, and it has a very thin cross incised into it in deep channels. I think, again, another opportunity has been really missed. Tourism in this country is worth £129 billion a year, and people come to look, amongst other things, at our medieval buildings, and that includes the kings and queens and knights and saints, sinners, courtiers who are buried in there. And I think what a lot of people in Leicester who were surveyed by the local newspaper, the Leicester Mercury, and many others felt is that this tomb just doesn't really quite cut it. It looks rather cheap, uninspiring, as if it was designed by a committee. Ultimately, it's a little bit forgettable. It looks like it comes from the car park that he was found under. And this kind of stark, brutalist style of design may have been in vogue in the 50s and 60s, but it's quite underwhelming now, and I don't think it says anything either about Richard's day or about us today.
As I understand it, the burial service will be an Anglican one, but he would have been a Roman Catholic, I think, wouldn't he? He predated the Reformation.
He would have been, that's right. He died in 1485, so the Reformation was still 50 years away. So the beliefs that he would have been born, lived and died in would have been when England was a fiercely Roman Catholic country. So there was an expert from the University of Oxford who's found a reburial rite from the Roman Catholic Church from the late 1400s. Reburial was fairly common in those days. Richard himself even reburied his father, possibly using a rite very similar to that. So I think the question that we have to ask ourselves is, should there be a respect for his beliefs, in which case I think it's clear that he should be reburied according to a Roman Catholic rite, or are we going to impose an admittedly beautiful, but what's fundamentally a late Tudor Anglican liturgy and church on him? And in a way, it's a doubly pointed question because, of course, he was killed in battle by Henry Tudor, the first Tudor, and it was the Tudors that started the Church of England.
And I understand that the cost of this reburial will be £2.5 million, and £500,000 that's coming from the Leicester Diocese. Is it worth the money?
It's coming from the diocese and it's coming from private donations. In my view, for that sort of money, something far more impressive, something far more imposing, regal and fitting of the man could be created and put in place.
It seems sad. I mean, you're not very happy about any of this, really, are you? It's not really doing the kind of respect that you feel he should have.
Well, and lots of other people, really. We don't get the opportunities to rebury a medieval monarch. And this country, we've been talking about British values a lot in the media in the last couple of weeks. And one of the things that's very important to us, obviously, is tradition. And this is a great opportunity to have a piece of historical pageant to remind people of some of the traditions of this country. And I think many people feel it's being a little bit squandered. It's all a little underwhelming.
That was Dominic Selwood talking about Richard III's final resting place.